Welcome to our folks who are joining us via Zoom. We're glad that you're here, and welcome to our in-person people. We're also glad you're here. Zoom people, you're missing out on after-school snacks that we have here in person, just in case you're feeling like you're missing out. That's what you're missing out on. My name is Susie Dees, and I'm the Senior Director of Professional Learning here at West 40. And my counterpart, I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm Julie Morris, and I'm one of our professional learning specialists on Susie's team, as well as an executive coach. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, so we're glad that you're here today. We know that there have been a lot of webinars that the State Board of Education has put out about summative designations and about the Equity Journey Continuum. What we're hoping to do with you all today is pare it down just a little bit. You'll see that a lot of our slides come from the State Board, and that's on purpose. We want to make sure that we're giving that consistent message throughout our region and with all of our stakeholders. And we will also give you access to this presentation that has a lot of hyperlinks that will take you to a lot of resources that are also found on ISBE's page. So, annual summative designations. This is a slide. You'll note all of the slides that are directly from ISBE will have the same kind of look with the blue and the State Board logo on there. But the annual summative designation is given out every year. Well, it hasn't been for the last couple of years, but it's designed to be given out annually based on the prior year's performance. And so the last time that we had designations was in the year 2000. It is designed to use multiple measures to score and to put schools in what is called school improvement status. So a way of kind of sorting the schools throughout the state as a way of responding to the Every Student Succeeds Act. It's something that we're required to do. All states are required to order their schools. So in our—
How about the makeup of the kids? What do you got in there? So you got juniors and sophomores?
Yeah, and then
okay. So if you're joining us in Zoom, make sure that you're muted. We can use the chat feature if you have questions. And then once a school is designated, they remain in status for 4 years as a way to bring about consistency. And the research shows that long-term change, you have to give your initiatives some time to grow in that. Oops. So there are 4 types of there are 4 designations that schools will get each year. They start with exemplary, and that is the top 5% of schools and their scores throughout the state. The next level is that of commendable, and those are our schools the overall who are not in the, I'm sorry, it's the top 10% for exemplary. And so our commendable schools are the ones who are not in that top 10%, but they don't have any school or any student groups that are not meeting the goals that have fallen into the targeted range. So commendable schools, what separates them from exemplary is the fact that they're just not in the 10%, top 10% of schools. And so that's the distinguishing factor. Then when you get to targeted support, this is where you have student groups in your schools who are performing at or below group, and our lowest performing schools are our comprehensive schools. So the distinguishing factor between our commendable and targeted schools is that we have student groups who are not performing at the same rate as their peers. And then our comprehensive schools are the schools with the overall performance in the bottom 5% of schools throughout the state. So how these scores are obtained through the multiple measures, and you can see in the graph that the majority of the score comes from growth of how students have performed on the summative assessments. And then the big difference there are several differences between the 2019 and the 22 indicators. And those are that there are new annual targets for the English language arts and math proficiency indicators. So we have new targets for those in 2022. At the elementary level, they're in different kinds of bands. They're paired up in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then at the high school level at 11th grade. We're giving all students identified as English learners in school year 2021, one more year, of data, in addition to their timeline for their progress to proficiency indicator. Something else that's different is we were supposed to be starting in with science proficiency, but for 2022 only, it's going to be based on participation. So if 95% of your students take the science assessment, you will get 100% of, you will have received 100%. And then there's a whole matrices of, you know, how many points you get. 75% of your students did not take the science assessment, then you won't in that indicator. And then another big change from 2019 to 2022 is that the state incentivized making improvements to chronic absenteeism. And so there are a whole bunch of formulas or a whole bunch of weights that are in the notes for this presentation. And if we have time, we can go back and look at those, but trying to incentivize improvements to chronic absenteeism.
So this is a chart. This is an interesting chart, I think, that really takes what you just saw on the slide before this and breaks it into the two categories of academic indicators and school quality and student success indicators. So 75% of our status is based on academic indicators. The other 25% are based on the indicators around student and school quality and success. And what those are really about are your chronic absenteeism rate and then the climate survey, which most of our schools in the state of Illinois take the 5 essentials, but there are a couple of other that are allowed to be used. But this is one way to take a look. So you have your high school band down the bottom and you have your elementary band on the top that goes into what those are. So who's included in the calculation? So all of your students in your district are included in the calculation if they've been in your district or in their school for at least half the year. And practically speaking, that's 134 days by the calculation. So if they're in a school, in one of your schools for 134 days, then that is, they are brought into that picture. The other part is that your groups. So your groups need to be at least 20. So your student groups, which are these here, these are all the student groups and they're the same if they've been in the past. However, there's the one students formerly with disabilities that is no longer a group in 2022. So groups are considered our student groups that we look at around race, around socioeconomics and so forth, students with disabilities, 504s and so forth. So that's what that means. But then the 20, you need to have at least 20 people, 20 students in a given group in at least 5 of the 8 indicators. So if you take a look back at this screen, we've got 8 total indicators. 6 of them are academic for elementary, 5 of them are academic for high school. And so you have to have at least 5 of the 8 indicators. The student has to be at least 5 of those indicators. And they have to be one of those indicators, have to be your school quality and success. So it has to be one of the 2 in the yellow. So that's how it's determined which students are considered part of the group. So there's the 4th step, the calculating. So as Susie said, we're not going to go into detail with calculating. We put Ray Clements, who is I've met with her. She's very smart, knows all these calculations inside and out, and she's very good at helping you break it down into normal people, well, not normal people, Julie speak, or people who aren't really into all the numbers. But she's very good at helping you do a deep dive. She's very accessible. Email her and she'll help you do whatever you want to do with your actual calculating. But for the most part, for the overview, the big view picture of it is that there's a 4-step process. The first process is to collect and calculate your data. So that's your performance data. Then it's put into a indicator score. It's converted into an indicator score between 0 and 100. Then that indicator score is taken and weighted based on a number of different things. And that gets you your index score of 0 to 100. And then it's taken into the summative designation, looking at the rank order and comparing based on the all student group, as Susie stated earlier. So that's how the process works. And of course, there's 900,000 reports that you can look at to dig deeper and deeper into this information. Yes.
I'd like to add that I spoke with Ray Clemens, and she is willing to set up times with individual schools or districts one-on-one. I agree with you. She's a great resource. And she said, all they have to do is contact me, and I'm more than happy to help them disaggregate or figure out their own data, individual one-on-one.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to take advantage of that if they're so inclined. She's a good resource and making herself available.
And my small study team and I reached out to her one morning and in the afternoon, and we met with her 2 days later. So that's how accessible she is or was at that particular.
We have a question regarding student growth. Can you explain how the state is calculating growth from one year to the next?
So growth is calculated. So these 134 students, we're looking at them, the students who were in your school last year, who are this year, who were in the grade before the year before. It's the 134. So any students who came from the school, and it could be any school in your district. So if you, for example, have a sister school and you've got 1 through 3 in one school and 4 through 6 in the other, it doesn't matter if they go to that sister school or if they go to any school in your district, as long as they've been in the district for 134 days and they were there last year and had a designation, and then they will be calculated for this year. That's how your growth score is determined.
Before we go on to the Equity Journey Continuum, are there any other questions that you have about summative designations or the difference in them in 2022 from 2019? Either from our folks on Zoom or anyone?
There's no other questions in the chat.
So next is the Equity Journey Continuum. And we're going to look a little bit deeper about what our score means, kind of what is it, how do I see it, what does it look like, how will others see it, how will this appear for others, and how do I craft my communication about this. And to talk a little bit about what it is, we really like this very short video by Dr. Ayala, and so we're going to show you that and let Dr. Ayala explain it to you.
Hello, I'm State Superintendent of Education, Dr. Carmen Ayala. A year ago, ISB adopted a strategic plan that included the equity statement, as well as a plan to develop a tool to help districts discover, understand, and improve their equity story. The tool is called the Equity Journey Continuum. This informational tool will help districts identify gaps, resources, and supports. Ultimately, the goal is to assist districts and their communities to make informed decisions about their district's equity strengths, opportunities for growth, access and supports, and to speak effectively about where to invest their equity efforts and resources. The Equity Journey Continuum analyzes district-level data, and this data is already reported and verified by districts in 3 key areas: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators, the same areas that are a focus on our strategic plan. The tool places districts in one of the steps along the continuum, from step 1, meaning there are large gaps in equity, to step 4, meaning there are minimal gaps in equity. We know that equity will look different in every one of our school communities. So we look forward to being your partner throughout your equity journey as we work together to create a more equitable school culture that will benefit all students, all schools, and all communities.
Okay, so this isn't something that is brand new. It's something the Board of Education has been working on in partnership with Loyola University Chicago Institute for Racial Justice for over a year now. And so the slides that we're going to show are from ISB and Loyola together, trying to communicate this out to all of you. And so, like Dr. Ayala said, these will be public pieces of information in 3 areas: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. Those will be the 3 areas that you'll receive a score that will be public facing on the report card this year. And you'll be ranked according to this 1 through 4 system, like she said, between having large gaps in equity, moderate gaps, small gaps, and minimal gaps in equity. And this is what the public will see. What exactly is on this screen? This is as far as the public will be able to go and see how your district ranks according to this Equity Journey Continuum Index. And so there's a little bit of a descriptor up here that you can see. And then the narrative, this is where you're going to have a chance to get out in front and tell your story. What's the story behind the data? What's the story behind the graph that people see on that report card? And so you can see that they'll see this and you'll just have an overall score. As schools and districts, you of course will be able to go into my IRC and you'll be able to drill down into that data and see what exactly it is. But this is what the public's going to see. Overall, they're going to see this graph and they won't be able to drill down into any of it. And they will see your narrative should you choose to write one. And so where do you find it? So what you're going to want to do is go into my IRC or the IllinoisReportCard.com. And when you open up your page, you'll see a whole bunch of links. And this is the one that you want, the My Data Review and Verification Tool. That's your DRVT, and it's password protected. So only people with the rights to see that information at their particular level within your school or district will be able to see that data. It's not open to the public, and people who have an account can simply log in. If you don't have an account, you can log in, but until your district entity gives you permission, you won't be able to go in and see that data. Were we gonna show them what it looks like? Yeah. Let's see if I can.
Oh, I don't think we linked it. It's okay. Okay. No, that comes later. Okay. All right. Okay, so digging a little deeper into the 3 categories, as Susie said earlier, and as Dr. Ayala talked about, there are the 3 different categories: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. So what is that all about? What does that mean, number 1? And then number 2, where does that data come from? Because in the short narrative from Dr. Ayala, she talked about that we are using data that we already have. The state is not new data. They're not having you do new things in order to determine what your continuum is. All of our information, all of our different data that we have, we can look at in a disaggregated fashion. And so that's how this is being played out. So under student learning, the big takeaways under student learning really walks around the significant academic gains for every single child. Are they making significant academic gains each year? Are they increasing in knowledge, skills, and opportunities? That's a big piece of the picture, has to do with opportunities. What are our students getting the opportunity to do in our schools? Graduation, are they equipped to pursue successful futures? Every single child, not just particular children. And then pay special, one of the things that we're paying special attention to is really that historic inequities around opportunity, around expectations, around beliefs, around support, and so forth. So that's really what the student learning piece is about. On here, the second slide that's on this slide shows you exactly all of the different places that this score, this indicator score between 1 and 4 has been given to you. And remember, it's steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Where are you on that continuum? And so it has things such as the access, your the scores, the proficiency scores, the adjusted cohort graduation rates, all of the different academic type things that our students are being assessed on, or that we're gathering data at the state, and as school districts and schools, we need to report on yearly. So that's the student learning. The next one are learning conditions. So the learning conditions, that second one that you can see that the public will see your index score on, that has to do with resources. How are our schools resourced? What are the conditions in which our students are learning? So I think that one of the biggest steps that our state has taken in this area is the adequate funding levels and the EBF funding formula, changing all of that, because we need to really look at every student being able to have what they need and the finances that they have, not just based on what that's going to look like based on the zip code that they live in. So I think that's one big step in the right direction. But it's really about what are our schools providing around creating safe and healthy environments for our students. So it's about that. How are we as a state really focused on making sure every child has that opportunity and that they are really being able to be met with their academic and social emotional learning needs individually as each individual student. So that's the learning conditions. These are the types of things. Now you'll notice the climate survey, and I'm a huge proponent of the 5 essential survey because there's so much data, so much rich data in there that we can really dig into as a district and as individual schools. But a lot of the rating or a lot of the score around this is based on the climate survey. And so that's a big piece of that. And site-based expenditure reporting and a couple of other things that are added on to that. But that's how that score is determined. The third one is elevating educators. And this is all about the educator. Our educators, are we preparing our educators for our students of today and the future? Are educators able to relate to their students? Even though maybe our demographics aren't the same as our students in our systems, are we still able to be culturally competent, or are we able to be racially conscious? How are we becoming a school system that focuses on each individual child around our educators? And then how are we affording every child high expectations and the guidance to get them there, the guidance and support? So that's really about the elevating educators, and it's focused on how are the educators being resourced, or how are the educators being supported in order to make that step for all of our children. This information comes from a lot of different sources too. And if you remember, if you look at your school report card, it talks about the various demographics, the comparison between what are your demographics of your students versus your staff, your administrators, your education level of your staff. It takes the information from the report card about what staff are in your schools. Do they have experience? Do they not have experience? And what does that look like? And how is that dispersed and so forth? So that's the type of data that's being pulled in order to determine what this category and what that score is for elevating educators. So why is this the right conversation? I think that Dr. Ayala and the state has taken a huge step and are leading in many ways the concept of equity. And I know that it's a difficult conversation. I know that people are not sure where to go with that topic or what it even means in my particular school district. And the state shared a graphic, which is very similar to this, but I like to show this graphic when we're talking about equity because it takes us one step further, because we're a school system and we're focused on our students. And yes, we want to provide that equity, provide the supports that our students need in order to work through the system. But I also believe that in that final column, we're in the place in education with all of the changes that we've had to undergo over the last few years and all of the awakening that we're making as a state and as local school districts. We're at the point where we need to take away that fence. How do we change the system as opposed to changing the child? So I think that's one of the things and one of the steps in the right direction that we're taking as a state to really look at ourselves and how are we doing that? And what do we need to do to make some changes in our system in order to meet the needs of those students? So equity in our district, this is a statement, if you recall at the very beginning, that very long statement, I think it's the equity statement that Dr. Ayala referred to. I kind of broke it up a couple ways. And then I also used the same information in the following slide to ask ourselves some questions. So it's really taking this information and that Illinois has an urgent and collective responsibility. So we're all trying to work together to make sure that all of our schools across the state and our districts are getting what they need in order to provide the systems for our students. Our policies, we're looking at ensuring that all of our policies, our programs, our practices affirm the strengths that every child brings. So we're looking at everything. It's almost like an audit. What is it that we need to do to our in our policies, our practices, our belief systems, and everything that we do. We deliver comprehensive support and programs for educational opportunities for each and every child. And so these are the same things that you would ask when we're looking at this information. I know that a lot of people are a little bit panicked about what is this even, what is the importance of this and why are we even doing this as a state? So it's really, these are the simple questions. They're not that simple, but they are what we really just need to take from Dr. Ayala's and Loyola and the state and everyone who's worked on this so hard for the last few years, is that do our policies, programs, beliefs, behaviors, and practices affirm the strengths of each and every child? Do our policies and so forth honor the diverse backgrounds and life experiences? And do our policies, et cetera, deliver the comprehensive support and educational opportunities? So what the state has done in a nutshell is taken all of the information that we provide them and given to you your framework, your picture of where you're at in your particular school and what journey do you need to go on to get through to answer these questions and to make sure that we're realizing that for our students. And that's the Equity Journey Continuum in a nutshell.
Are there questions about the Equity Journey Continuum before we talk about communicating your story, crafting your story? Does anybody in the chat or anybody on Zoom or anybody in the room have any questions about the Equity Journey Continuum?
I've often been asked, report card data is typically at school designations or by school. And the question is, how is the equity continuum? Is that by school or by district? That's a common question that I get.
I believe it's by district.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a good question.
It's a really good question. Yeah.
That if our Sergio is on the call, maybe he can answer it.
I would think it has to be because when we go in under school, we don't see it.
Okay.
We let the district see it.
Okay,
It's by district.
good. Thanks for crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, Chris?
Yes, Susie, is the data used for the Equity Journey Continuum, is it older data, like several years old, or is it more recent data?
It's recent data. And it's data that has already been verified. So schools had all summer and districts had all summer to verify their data. So it's been in the system and, multiple reaching out to districts, asking to go into that DVRT and verify the data, because knowing that these designations were coming. And the state did give a slight reprieve last week. They gave like 2 days for anybody who had very specific errors in their data regarding attendance. They gave them until the end of business day on Friday last week to update that, knowing that it might change, it might flex some scores for summative designations slightly. But all of the data that's used for this Equity Journey Continuum is data that schools have already uploaded in SIS into IWAS. And so it's taking that data and parsing it out along this continuum. Does that answer your question? Thanks. Any other questions?
Is it by district? Because the whole district should be working together as a unit to deliver equity throughout. Oh, that's what Barbara said. It is by district.
Oh.
Thank you, Barbara, for
Thank you,
clarifying.
Barbara.
Yes, Barbara. Barbara's from ISB. She said it is by district because the whole district should be working together as a unit to deliver equity throughout.
Well, you just
Thank you,
reminded,
Barbara.
you just reminded me that we do have a couple of ISBE folks on this call. Is there anything that they would like to add that, you know, we, like I said, we've taken 1.5 hours multi-webinars and boiled them down to what we're giving you today? Is there anything that they would like to
Yeah.
add at this point?
Barbara, is there anything that you want to add to the conversation that we
About designation.
about
or
designations or the Equity Journey Continuum?
Well, I can only speak to the Equity Journey Continuum because I've been working on this for over 2 years with a lot of staff here. And I must say your presentation beautifully summed it up. I absolutely love how you delivered it and dove just deep enough right now, you know, into what everyone needs to know. So no, I thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Barbara.
So now we're going to talk about telling your story. Like, this is your opportunity, right? The official designations and the report card won't be released until October 27th. It's going to be embargoed, released to the press tomorrow, but you have some time. You have, what, 7-8 days to put your narrative into the report card, but it is a way to tell the story behind the data, because data is just data. We all get feelings about it, and sometimes we get hurt feelings about it, but the data doesn't have any emotion. And so being able to craft your narrative about the data is really important, because it helps put the data into context. It helps to be able to tell the work that you've been doing, you know, during the pandemic and the things that you have on the horizon. And so we're going to be talking about how do you craft your story for both the summative designations for 2022 and the Equity Journey Continuum, because they're all going to be on the report card, and you have opportunities to put in your narrative for both of those items. And so we are going to share this PowerPoint with you, and I'm sorry for the people in Zoom, I'm probably really big right now to you. But when you click on this link, it takes you right to ISBE's link. Probably faster than it's going right here, right now. But this explains the way that you can tell your story on the Illinois report card. So you'll be able to have a district provided statement. This will appear on your snapshot page of the report card. And then you'll also be able to enter in a narrative for your Equity Journey Continuum and for your summative designation.
And one thing to note while Susie's manipulating the technology is that the write-ups, the narratives can be changed in real time. They don't shut off on October 27th. So all of these narratives, as you're doing work, as you're learning more, as you're digging deeper into the continuum or to the other things, you can update those on real time.
Yeah, and you can go in and edit those anytime. So say you put something out and think these are the types of questions that my stakeholders are going to have, and then they surprise you. that you've crafted this beautiful narrative of exactly why you are where you are, and then somebody pops up with a question that you didn't anticipate, or a lot of people have some questions that you didn't anticipate. You can go in and change your narrative. And so I think that's a really nice opportunity and shows some flexibility. So where you're going to see this is when you go onto my IRC report card, you're going to click on the district narrative submission. And for those of you in Zoom, you probably can't see where I'm pointing to, so I'll make my pointer right here. And then we also have the link in here. Everything you could ever need on the how-tos are on ISBE's website. The reason why we're trying to distill it down is because there are a lot of pages and a lot of links and things on the ISB website. So we've tried to pick out the ones that we believe are the most helpful. But this one is every step-by-step direction for going in with access and everything highlighted. So even if I just scroll, I'll try to not go too fast so you don't get dizzy. But when you scroll in here, like this is that first page, and you can see the DVRT is below what's highlighted. But my principal entry form is what you're going to click on. And then it tells you exactly how to do this. The Equity Journey Continuum comes first, and you can add that in. And then it has the opportunity to add in your narrative for your summative designations. So those are two really helpful tools for crafting your narrative. And so we really like this slide that the state board shows, the 6 W's of communication. And really, because it's all about helping you think about when you're crafting this communication and when you're telling the story behind your data, what are the questions you need to ask yourself? Really like this, what is the most important thing for people to know or understand? So people are going to have a reaction. People are going to have a reaction to the summative designation. They're going to have a reaction to the Equity Journey Continuum. These are the things that real estate agents love to highlight. And so these make us nervous, right? And so what's the most important piece for people to understand? And then, who needs to know, when should the message be ready? We kind of know some of these, but why this designation? Why this score on the Equity Journey Continuum? Why will the audience care? So anybody that cares enough to go to find you on the report card, what do they need to know about why you have this designation or this Equity Journey Continuum score? And then what are you going to do about it? Like my best advice is the advice that I always gave my kids growing up is own it. Own whatever it is that the data says. Talk about how the measures that you've put in place. We know that substantive change takes 3 to 5 years at least to get going. So you've probably put some things in place and you're waiting to see how to have some consistency and some fidelity. If that's your story, make sure you include it in there. And then tell them what your plan is next. Because we do know with those summative designations come some funding. And so how are you going to use that funding? What are you going to do different so that you get different results? Let them know those kinds of things. And then we also like this slide from the Equity Journey Continuum. And we think that this could also use these same questions for your summative designation. They're not exclusive for the Equity Journey Continuum, but what questions will parents, students, staff, and community stakeholders ask when they see the district's continuum? Any place that says continuum, I'm going to tell you to say to yourself and designations. Like, don't just put something out on the MyIRC. Think about proactively communicating, letting your teachers know what it is. These are our designations. These are the steps we've taken so far. This is what we're going to do next, because they're the ones who are going to be asking the grocery store. Let your school board know. They're the ones who are going to be stopped and, when it's put on Channel 5 News or whatever, the good news or the bad news, what's their reaction to it? Don't have them be caught off guard and have to respond to something that they may or may not know very much about. But really, these kind of build on each other to talking about how can parents and community stakeholders get involved. They give the example of completing the 5 essentials. The 5 essentials is the best longitudinal data we have. It's been required in Illinois for a very long time. And even just recently, every single year. So no matter what your feelings are about the 5 essentials survey, it's one of those factors, and it's a huge component in this equity journey continuum. Maybe you want to invest in educating your parents, your teachers, your students on the importance of it and what those questions mean and how you respond as a district to those. So being really intentional about those, because your community and your parents and your teachers and your students, they can have an impact on this. If everyone is taking the 5 essentials seriously and knows what it is and why it's being given and how it's used, then you have a better shot at actually being able to make some changes.
Okay, this is kind of kind of summing up what Susie just talked about. When you're looking at providing the information and providing your narrative about your designation, here are the 4 categories. So as an exemplary, what are you always celebrate those successes, because no matter what the situation, there's going to be successes. There are things that we are doing very well that we need to make sure that the public and everyone knows about. Continue on that path and determine your areas of growth. So we're in exemplary status. We're doing all these things. We're celebrating these things. And our next step is, and we're going to continue on. Same thing with commendable. Do the same type of thing. We're celebrating those successes. We're going to continue growing. We're going to continue our next steps because we're always working toward greatness. The targeted category and the comprehensive category, again, we're celebrating the successes that we have. No matter what the situation, as I just said, we do have successes and we need to put those out there and not focus just solely on what we're doing wrong or why are we in this status. It's about what we're doing well, and then what are the areas of growth? And then what is the plan? So maybe engaging with an approved provider. And as Susie talked about, there's money that can be used to work with approved providers to help you put a plan in place, a long range plan, not necessarily a let's do these 3 technical things to make it better, but comprehensive long range planning and district improvement and school improvement. Same thing with the comprehensive. We'll do all of those types of things. Who needs to know? Susie talked about this a little bit. Your school board needs to know. They carry the vision, they carry the mission for the district, and they need to be able to articulate how does all of this that we're doing fit within the mission. And yes, this is our designation, and this is what we're continuing to do. Same thing, administrators and teachers. She talked about that. They are the change agents. They're the ones on the ground doing the work, so they need to know the scores. One of the things that I was in one of the webinars and they talked about really sharing this with students. And I'm not sure that back when I was in the district and the superintendent that I did a very good job of really sharing with our students, what is it exactly these designations mean and what impact does it have on you? Because they're the ones who are taking the assessments. And if we're always complaining about, well, they're not necessarily taking it seriously. Well, sometimes they may not know the why and the what and how we're doing it and what the impact is. So the students, and then of course your parents and your community at large. They are taxpayers. They are the ones who are holding us accountable from that perspective. And so we need to be able to craft those in a way that they can understand based on their background or knowledge about education. And then finally, when do the messages go out? We talked about this earlier, but they are going to be embargoed in the media tomorrow. So how are you crafting your information that you're going to share with the media? Because they are certainly going to get into that. And we'll see all kinds of big articles in the newspapers on the 27th or 28th or whenever that they can actually do that. Insert your narratives as we were talking about and showing you how you can do that. Insert those narratives in all of the 3 areas. If you are if you're looking at the district level designation and where you put that narrative, if you have that password or that ability, that will pop up as one of the options for you to put your district narrative in along with the building narrative, because your principals are the ones building your building narratives. And so hopefully that's something that you're working intentionally on with your schools in order to make sure that those are in good shape. And then the designations are published at 9 a.m. on October 27th. 4 days before Halloween. Resources.
Well, so we do have a couple of other resources that we handpicked out of ISBE's resources about what's new with accountability. It's where a lot of the information that we picked out for today's presentation came from. There's a whole page on summative designations on ISBE and a whole page on the Equity Journey Continuum. So a plethora of resources for you to dig deeper and go into. And so we also,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. And by whole page, she means there's gobs of webinars and PowerPoint slides that you can get, that if you weren't able to attend webinars and so forth earlier this summer, they're all there.
and the
you're able to-
recordings of
and the
those
recordings.
webinars too. So, you know, if you have huge chunks of time and really want to dive into it, there are more than enough resources available at the state board. And then I don't know if Sergio's on Zoom with us or not, but he's the equity lead at ISBE, and we do have Barbara, who is also a resource. And then Ray Clements is the Summative Designation lead at ISBE. Not sure her exact title, but we know that she's very helpful with Summative Designations. So this is how we've dubbed her right now. And even just sending her an email, in her email response to you, it'll say, book a time with me. And my team is meeting with her at noon on Monday to dive through some of our schools' designations who shared their raw reports with us. And so that's something you can do too.
So I was gonna email Ray and,
Yeah.
so her email address on there's no Z, is that?
Yes,
And also-
yes, and it's A instead of R, because it's A.Ray. So that's her correct email address. Mhm.
Participants are wondering if they can get access to the information presented in the slides. Are you going to share the slide deck?
Yes, yes.
As soon as this is over, we'll send it to everyone who was on the list, whether they were going to make it.
Jamie, I can send it to you right now and you can drop it in the chat if you want.
Okay. Other questions about?
There's one clarification that Barbara made about the data for the Equity Continuum Journey score. She said the data is used from the 2018-2019 school year.
Oh,
It's because that's the last year of complete data before the pandemic. But moving forward, so for next year in 2023, the data utilized for the Equity Journey Continuum will be from the 22-23 school year.